I am making a platformer fighter game where you need to push other players off the level, and I want to release it to Steam, but it's missing a lot of stuff, like items. For PushOver, the game I was talking about, I want the items to be an extra chaos component, because without items the game is a bit boring. So let's start with adding items. That's an item. Or well, it will be. First I wanted to create a shockwave when using an item, to test if picking up items even worked. For this I basically assign a variable to the player that says whether the player is holding an item or not. And when the player pushes a button, the game creates a shockwave. To create a shockwave I used another shockwave I've already created. Before I started working on this item system, I worked on something else, a dash. This is a dash. It's especially useful for recoveries. You can also dash downwards into the ground, and this is where the shockwave comes in. When you dash into the ground, a shockwave ignites and you can't move for a short amount of time. And this shockwave pushes all the other players away from you. And that's basically all there is to the dash. It's just a little extra thing to your movement. But now I have the shockwave, and I can use it for testing my item. Pressing a button while having an item gives you a shockwave, but that's obviously not what we want. We want to have more items. And that's where OOP comes in, or OOP. OOP stands for Object-Oriented Programming, and we can do this in Unity too. And we will use a simple form where item is our object class. And we will be able to use this item object in our code, such as saving it in the player controller to know what item they are holding. The item object itself will have multiple variables, which will make it very easy for me to add a lot of different items with different set variables, without having to change a lot of stuff. If you look at my first test, we have an item object with a variable name test. When the player interacts with an item object which is different from the item object. So one item object is the object class of the item, or it's in the code, and with item object I mean the item object you see in game which holds an item and will spawn on an item spawn locate. I don't know why I named it like this, I'm sorry. But back to the test. When the player picks up the item object, this one, the item gets assigned to the player. We can now print the name of the item assigned to the player, which is indeed test. So now I can spawn item object, but it's still the same object. So in the item object I add a list of items, which will be randomly selected. Because I want to know which item spawns, let's also add a sprite variable to the item object. This will automatically assign the given sprite to the item object. This one. So you can see the difference between items. And let's also add that sprite inside the player to show what item the player is holding. Not every item can be made with just using this item object. For example, I want to be able to throw a shockwave grenade. And for this I need a throwable object, which will spawn when using the item that has a throwable variable turned on. So as you can see, there are a lot of variables already added to the item object. And I can increase this for the items I want. Creating a grenade will require 2 more variables, range and force, which will be then given to the throwable item object. When hitting the ground, this object will generate a shockwave with those variables. I also added spawn locations, where random items will spawn. It will be less frequent than this though. And I added a small spawn effect, just to give it some juice. Just know that all the visuals will probably be completely redone, or at least changed. I'm not sure yet. Now I can add a lot of items. Just add some variables to the item object and more items can be made. For example, I made a shiny pusher that gives a huge damage and knockback multiplier to the player. For this we need 2 more variables, or in this case multipliers, damage multiplier and knockback multiplier. And this can also be used for another item I had, the golden pusher, which is just less powerful than the shiny pusher. And I can make a lot of other pushers if I want to with this system. I also wanted to create an item that spawns a bounce pad for a short amount of time, which obviously went perfect. Yeah. And for this I could again use the throwable item object, but give it another variable of the object to spawn, in this case the bounce pad. The last couple of items I will speed through a bit, because there are a couple, not that much yet. So if you have got any ideas, let me know. There were some extra variables needed, such as speed multiplier and jump multiplier. And with all this we created the following items. Shockwave grenade, mine, which will only explode when touching, bounce pad spawner, speed multiplier, jump multiplier, double jump, which now kinda lets you fly like Kirby. I haven't fixed that yet. Golden pusher and shiny pusher. And as said before, these are just the first items I've got. I also created an option to turn off item spawning, or even just turning off the spawning of individual items, which is pretty cool. And the last thing I did was create a character object using again OOP. This way I can give each character its own statistics and thus create special characters. For example, green can jump higher, blue is faster, red does more damage and yellow does more knockback. And I made a new character select screen, which now uses a list of character objects, so I don't have to manually add each character. If I create another character, it gets automatically put into that character selection screen. And as you can see, it's not much that I've got, but I've made it so that I can easily add a lot of new stuff. And that's pretty important. And that will be hopefully really useful for me when adding new items and characters. And that's basically all I did. You can wishlist PushOver via the link in the description. It will really help me. I will keep working on PushOver on this channel with new devlogs, but you can also follow my progress via my Twitter or X. Also, that link is in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Hopefully. Bye!